Okay, let me just get my notes ready. Because of my minutes of meeting, I can tell the last time I've been in my office during a meeting.
When was that?
Actually, I came in December. Actually, in January. Wait, December. Yeah, in December of 2020, I came in a few times. The first week of December and the last week of November. Okay, so
Can anyone access my my web server? Do you have any difficulties with that?
Your website or in general Swansea one?
My website, my Swansea website.
Okay, let me have a check. Look. I have access. I can see your website.
That's strange.
okay. Okay, how long are you planning for your presentation?
Well, it should be 10 minutes. I think I would say it's roughly, there's no strict 10 minutes. Yeah, I think I would exceed it, but I have my like stopwatch.
Good.
To watch this, see, and how I'm gonna do it.
Good, good.
Work it around.
Okay, does anybody want to have any last comments before Mohammed starts? Okay, why don't you go ahead and then start, Mohammed.
Okay, can you see my screen now, like full screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is a presentation for my Viva. The title of my thesis is Interactive Visual Analysis of Translations. My PhD is a little bit introduction of my thesis, is funded by the Technical Identification Training Corporation, Saudi Arabia. And this thesis is a result of collaborative work with the College of Arts and the Humanities in Swansea University, Professor Tom Cheeseman in particular, and a project called Translation Arrays, Version Variation Visualization. And the motivation of this work is like driven by the typical workflow of translation studies scholar. They usually have like 5 like steps to do their work. They first collect the data and like create the data and like annotation and stuff like this. And this is usually is done by themselves. And when they enter the last 3 steps, they have difficulties as annotated in the table. They usually use for example, for the data pre-processing, they usually use standard black box and non-informative way of doing such things. And they usually just apply what they have, and they don't understand the process itself. So the challenge and the way we want to tackle this is to implement a visual application that enables the domain users to understand and interact with the NLP processes like visually. This is like the challenge and what we want to do. And the second step of of these three steps is the alignment. They usually, when they collect like multiple translations, they align them manually, and they use the usual like very standard alignment tools, which produce sequential alignments in most of them, and it's quite laborious and tedious and manual and lots of errors, and does not exploit any computational power. So the challenge is now to implement a visual application that allows users to exploit like the current computational capabilities and provide capabilities to align multiple translations interactively and visually, and allow also the user to intervene in the process. The last step in the typical workflow is the analysis and like the knowledge extraction of these alignments or like data sets. And they usually also use very standard way of doing this, like maybe reading. Most of the tools are either provide like distant reading or close readings separate, and also most of them does not apply multiple translations. So the challenge is to try and to integrate close and distant reading and enable the user to integrate them in one view and use like some interaction means to link them together. So this is the challenge that we want to tackle. So the objectives, first of all, we want to review the text visualization since it's a quite textual data set. So we want to review the current state of the art in text visualization. Then we'll tackle the first challenge, which is like a transparent and informative visual design that visualize NLP results. And the third objectives, and it's the second step in the workflow, is to provide like implement a semi-automatic visual alignment application. Also, we want to integrate close and distant reading of alignments. We want to build an application that integrates close and distant reading of the alignments. And like finally, we like based on this collaborative work, we want to draw a methodological and collaborative workflow. The thesis overview is how it's organized. Chapter 1 is introduction and motivation of our work, and quite introduction of the collaborative work and data set that Tom Cheeseman collected and his team. The second chapter is the survey of surveys of text visualization. And the third chapter will introduce the VNLP, Visible Natural Language Processing application that we designed to tackle the first challenge in the workflow. And chapter 4 is the introduction of the AlignVis design, semi-automatic alignment and visualization parallel translation. Chapter 5 is the TransVis, integrated distant and close reading of Othello translations, is to tackle the analysis challenge. And in chapter 6, we'll introduce the collaborative workflow, the experience that we have in our collaboration and the methodological workflow. And finally, in chapter 5, we'll draw some conclusions and future work directions. This is the SOS TextVis, a survey of surveys and text visualization, the second chapter. It's the first focused survey of surveys in text visualization. It includes multiple translations, multiple surveys that tackle TextVis, or like review TextVis. It also includes novel classification of text surveys in the reviewed literature. It also includes helpful survey metadata to facilitate comparison of the survey. It's a unique, valuable starting point and comprehensive overview for both newcomers and experienced researchers in the text visualization. This work was published in the Computers Journal, and also it was presented in the CGPC conference. The classification itself contained like 5 categories. The document-centered, which include the surveys that base their review based on the document type. Also, the second one is the task analysis, which base their classification on the task, user task analysis. The third category is the multifaceted surveys, which include multiple classification for each survey. And the fourth category is the cross-disciplinary surveys, which is the category that includes like digital humanities surveys. And the last one is the satellite themed, which is like quite general surveys that include text visualization or feature text visualization review. We include in the survey some survey recommendations. We include also some valuable discussions and summary future challenges in all of these reviews and surveys. The third chapter is the VNLP, Visible Natural Language Processing. It's the main contribution of this application is the introduction of the visible NLP concept. It's also introduced a novel interactive design that enables users to explicitly observe the NLP pipeline process. Also, it enables the user to intervene in the process and refine and update the NLP process. Also, we have included an application to text similarities quantification to demonstrate the usefulness and advantages of this design. We evaluated this design through feedback from a domain expert in modern languages. Also, this application is now under review in the Information Visualization Journal. There's a video here like demonstrates some of the layouts or the VNLP application. We have some requirements analysis to design this application to provide information about each pipeline stage that includes explanation of the corresponding stage, what it outputs and how it affects the intermediate results. We also show the explicit results at each stage and enable the user to adjust the parameters. Also provide a dynamic layout that adjusts to the user preference. We also demonstrate the usefulness and advantage through the NLP application, which is text similarities quantification. The next chapter is the Align Phys, a semi-automatic alignment and visualization for translations. You see, yes, it's working. It's a novel visual alignment tool to help translation scholars align multiple texts simultaneously. It also provides an interactive visual interface to help enhance and accelerate the alignment process and enable modification of the alignment. We evaluated this design through domain expert feedback, a comparison with the standard alignment tool, also a comparison with visual and computational alignment tools. This application was presented in the IV conference 2020. Also, we can see some demo on the right side of the alignment of multiple translations, how it works. The requirements analysis is to provide an overview of the aligned translations, as you can see on the right. Also, the support of multiple alignments. Also, to enhance and accelerate the alignment process. Also, to allow the user to refine and update and to intervene in the alignment and update the automatic alignment, the generated automatic alignments. Also, to enable the user to apply and test different similarity measurements for each alignment. This work was evaluated through domain expert feedback, also comparison with the computational and visual alignment tools, also a comparison with a standard alignment tool, which is called, what's called, I forgot the alignment tool, LV. I will recall it. Yes. The next chapter is TransVis, which is integrated distant and close reading of Othello translations. This application support integration between distant and close reading in the same view. Also implement the smooth zooming and panning to aid the integration between close and distant reading. It also provides a novel visual design that supports comparison of an arbitrary number of parallel translations. Also, it implements customized mechanism for rapid and interactive filtering and selection of large number of translations. Also, it implements interactive and dynamic analysis of similarity metrics as the user include and disclude translations. It's update automatically. This work was also evaluated through examples, detailed observations, case study, and domain expert feedback from a specialist in German translations, Shakespeare. Also, this work was published in TVCG journal. The requirement for this work is to enable comparison of translated parallel text, also to support both close and distant reading, we also to implement a layout that support close reading for further detailed analysis. Also to implement a visual design that considers stable versus unstable translations. Also a design that implement interaction that enables customization of the translated text. Also interaction that support general exploration and analysis. This work generally evaluated by domain expert feedback and case study using the design and the integrated similarity metrics. And this is the next chapter, the collaborating with the digital humanities, experience and methodology. And this chapter has like two important sections. The first section is the experience of collaborations, where we report our collaboration with the domain expert and through all the period of my thesis, and also from the start of the collaboration as well. And the second section is the collaborative workflow, and where we present the methodological workflow. This work is also under review in the CDVE conference. And this is the collaborative workflow that we presented. It contains like 3 spaces, 3 channels, and 3 criteria, which is detailed in the thesis. At the end there is summary. In this thesis, we presented a survey of the state of the art in text visualization. We also developed 3 designs for the visualization analysis of parallel translations in collaboration with the College of Art and Humanities and Swansea University, which are VNLP, AlignVis, and TransVis. We also presented a methodological and collaborative workflow. Thanks for your attention.
So it was 16 minutes.
Yes, it was 60 minutes. I suspected that I will exceed the time.
I
Thesis.
presume the time limit is it's just a guide, surely. It's not, is it expected to hit 10 minutes?
Yeah, they said it's 10 minutes. I wouldn't say they will interrupt. I don't think they will interrupt, and it's not strict 10 minutes, but
Yeah.
I would say that I exceeded even I would say like between 2 minutes, like plus or minuses will be tolerated, but I don't think it's bad.
Yeah. Maybe you should say at the start you've prepared a 15-minute presentation as requested, and then carry on. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Mohammed about his thesis? I certainly have a number of questions, but I thought I would give everybody else a chance.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not sure you explained, Mohammed, at the beginning, but what kind of data you have? Like, how you have a CSV file that contains of words and frequency in the text? Like, how did you extract these words for your software?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was like attempting to add some, I saw Dylan did this. I explained a little bit of his data. I really included some explanation of the data in the thesis itself. The data is already collected by the Art and the Humanities scholar, Tom Cheeseman. It's already in this website that I have image of. And it's an XML data set, which includes the 3A translations. They have also an alignment section in the data set itself. So they have the 38 translations text, and also they have some annotations for the alignments based on a specific segmentation. Yeah, so it's already warehoused in the VV, the Delighted Beauty website. Yeah, and a detailed explanation was like in the thesis itself.
That's great.
I have one. What's the most difficult problem you faced during your PhD?
Related to the research, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are few challenges, I would say. First of all, I am dealing with text visualization, and text is not straightforward, is unstructured type of, as you know, line, and it associated with different with multiple challenges. It's like the high dimensionalities. Mm-hmm. It's quite difficult to deal with. Also, we have some challenges with the data set at the beginning with the data set itself to understand, and because it's quite complicated and it's not well documented at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it took me a little bit of time to go through these XML files and understand the annotation, and with the help of Bob, and there was like previous emails exchange between the previous teams to quite explain some of the annotations. And so the first steps, they were like quite challenging to understand the data itself, and so to understand how to tackle some of the like next challenges. Yeah, there are a few challenges actually. Also, the nature of the data set itself is not easy. And I mean, the German translations, they are quite antiquated text, which means like old text that very difficult to have like a comparable text with. It's not easy also to train with other text. Most of the, for example, the current data sets, they use quite current data sets that based on Wikipedia or newspapers or like quite new type of text like books or something like this, which is quite difficult to compare with the old German translations. Also, the language barrier. I barely speak English, and this is quite German translation. So it was good that Bob understands some of it, and also, but yeah, there are some quite difficult and challenging view. But also, this is a good thing at the same time because we discovered some of the patterns, even though we didn't get to understand the language, which means that visualization helped. Our solutions helped sometimes when we like evaluated this. Sometimes the domain expert disapprove our new knowledge, and sometimes he proves that what we discovered. So the language barriers were quite challenging for me as well. Yeah, there are quite a few challenges in terms of like the research, beside the challenges that we stated in the thesis itself.
Okay. So for your example, align means, do you know any other approaches to this research topic?
Align first.
Yes.
Yeah, there is actually. There is a ITIL is quite comparable to our work. Stephen Yanaka did ITIL, and we compared it. We have a table that compare our work to ITIL. Yes, we have. Yeah, this is the LF aligner. That's the one I forgot. LF aligner. It's quite standard alignment tool. Vita, or like VITA, another one. So it's quite ITIL, Vita, LF aligners that we included in our table to align with the align fizz. Yeah, so ITIL is the most comparable one to our work. And it includes lots of capabilities, but most of it, align fizz is more advanced than the others in mostly two points. First is the that we test different similarity metrics. Most of them they use like static one different similarity metrics. We also have this multiple translations overview that they don't include in other alignment tools.
And what difference did those two additional sets of functionality have for the end user for the evaluation piece? Did you notice that they made a difference to the users?
Sorry, can you repeat, Matt?
So you pointed out the 2 points of difference between Align Viz and the and other works. I wondered if you had any reflections on or received any reflections from the end user in terms of the impact those features had in the tool.
Do you mean our tool, the impact of the user on our tool?
Yeah, so you said you tried different
yes.
Similarity metrics, for example. Did you get any feedback or understanding of the significance or influence that had in the use of the tool when you did your evaluation?
Yes, Yeah, actually, the most of this, for example, the testing of different similarity measurements was actually requested by the domain expert itself. Wasn't like in the original design, and so it was appreciated by the domain expert himself. And I see why, because in the like the usual case, there are like different results of the similarity metrics. So providing different similarity measurements were a way for him to trust the design. So it impacted like trustworthiness for him to the system. So I think in terms of testing different similarity measurements aspect, it was very appreciated. And the overview is also appreciated because most of the domain expert job is to, he does not want to disconnect from other translations while he reads, or because their task, their mainly task is to read. And in one of the meetings when we talked with the domain expert, and we asked him, what tasks do you want from this tool? He was like, he just said one word. He said, I want to read. That is the task. So providing multiple overview of the translations and enable him to not disconnect from other translations was much appreciated. So he can align one translation and see one segment and also see the other segments he already aligned. So he appreciated this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, in addition to that, there was the alignment of multiple translations simultaneously. That's a feature that's missing, right, from the previous one. So you can mention that as well.
Yes.
Kind of a big one.
What's the weakest part of this tool? Is that a tricky one, or?
It's a valid question.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say this is something I learned from Dylan's as well. Yeah, it's we have many future work for a line phase. There's many directions. I think the one of the weaknesses of our design is not deployable yet to the user. Tom Cheeseman wants to see it alive. One of the most demanding features is when are you going to include it in the delighted beauty? So I think in terms of actual weaknesses, there are of course there are some weaknesses. It's not the best tool, but it does what it's meant to do, and he wants it to be alive. He wants to play with it and work with it. Also, I think in terms of I would say I would enhance the user experience a little bit. I think the user experience is not that convenient for a line phase, but it also could be done the future work section.
Just to add to that, a good way of answering that question would be, a politically correct way would be to say the technology readiness level is still rather low. So the technology readiness level is a measure of how many users this software can be used by, or is ready for. And your technology readiness level is low. And Tom would have liked to have seen a higher technology readiness level. In other words, a piece of software that can be used by more people, not just you, or not just me, or not just maybe Tom. And that means like more thorough testing, more stability, and more debugging and so on. So more towards commercialization. That would be a good politically correct answer to that question. And that will be true about 99.9% of all PhD theses and master's theses.
Yeah.
Anyways, what were you going to say, Matt?
I was going to say you could call it a prototype tool to prove the concepts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Is a nice phrase. I like the
Yes.
idea of that. The one thing, I think you nearly did it, Mohammed, and then you veered off. If you get asked that question, you started by saying, okay, there's lots of future work that we would like to do. And I thought, brilliant. And then what you should have done, in my view, is you should have then spoke directly about the future work. For example, making it more robust, scalable, moving it beyond the prototype stage. The user would really like that. They're so keen for it. They want to use it and they want to pass it on to others to use it. And you could mention other types of future work as well. You veered off in the middle and kind of worried about it's not that good, it's not the best tool, and sort of mentioned sort of phrases like that. And I would just try and avoid that. And so whenever you hear, what is weak about it, immediately convert it in your head as if they've asked you, like, what would you love to do next with it? And just say, the future work for this, I'd really love to add this, I'd really love to do that, I've got ideas for this. Yeah. And so then you don't need to be thinking of the negatives at all. You just switch the question in your mind and just say, I'd really like to do these things. It's just a sort of use of language, I think, rather than anything. So, yeah, I would do that as a technique.
Yeah.
I have another question. Mohammed, why did you choose to work on text visualizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, was it was one of the available projects. Also available collaborator, a domain expert that is available and keen to work with us. And yeah, I think that's most of it. It's an available project with an available collaborator.
I'm gonna suggest an answer to that, but I don't want to suggest an answer at this second because it's related to another question I have. Any other questions?
What's the first and the second, Bob?
So yeah, I have a bunch of questions that
Okay.
I think are going to be very good to have prepared. So your presentation was very good, by the way, but the focus of the presentation was on what you did, which is fine, but the part that's missing is the whys. And you're going to get a lot of why questions during the Viva. This is the typical Viva. They can see what you did, they've read through the thesis, and then they're going to plow you with why questions. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? So I'm going to plow you right now with why questions to help you prepare. And the first question is, and you have to be prepared for this, which is why we're doing the practice Viva. So don't don't get upset at me. Why did Tom study these translations in the first place?
Well, I think the background of Tom Cheeseman is German translation, German studies. So these quite unique translations. I think he is the only one collecting them. He's the only owner of such a unique data set. So I think it's a if he didn't collect it, no one already collecting the Shakespeare translations, these all translations.
Any other reasons?
I don't know. I don't know why he's collecting this in the first place.
You have to be prepared for this question. So Tom was hoping that he could learn things about history and how history and translations are interconnected. So by studying the properties of the translations as they evolved over time, they reflect the culture at the time, the political environment at the time, and some other, let's say, the socio-political evolution of, in this case, it's Germany. So he was hoping to learn about the evolution of historical events in Germany by studying the translations. You have to be prepared for that question. It's a simple why, you're going to get a lot of fundamental why questions. That's a very challenging one, by the way, that question, which is why we're recording.
Yeah.
And it's challenging for me to answer too. And I also was asking Tom the same question. And if you look carefully, you can look carefully at some of Tom's writings about why he's doing it. For example, if you look at the introduction of the paper he published at the Digital Humanities Conference, it talks a little bit about the why, but it's very, very vague. It's very hand-waving and vague. It says things like, we're hoping to learn about the cultural evolution of history, and we're hoping to understand the political environment as it evolves over time. It's very, very fuzzy and hand wavy, for lack of a better. And I'm also bringing this up. It's very challenging. This clashes with computer science, by the way. This is a culture clash. I don't know how much the examiners are gonna, focus on this, but it's good to be aware that this is a culture clash. What is the culture clash? The culture clash is computer scientists love hypotheses. For example, did the translations become more varied over the 20th century? Yes or no? That's a hypothesis. Like, I think that there was a divergence in translations over the 20th century. That's a very concrete hypothesis. And computer scientists love hypotheses that are very concrete. But that's not the way that arts and humanities works. We're working with arts and humanities. So they don't form scientific hypotheses like we do. They'll say things like, I want something that allows me to explore the characteristics of translations over the course of history. That's not a hypothesis. It's just a desire. It's like, I want the ability to do this. So when a computer scientist is trying to get this thing out of you, why are you doing this? Why is he studying the translations? They're looking for hypothesis, but you're not able to give them the kind of computer science hypothesis that they want to have. It's going back to the why is he collecting these translations. you have to go back to the mindset of somebody from arts and humanities, which is, I want to study the history of the evolution of these translations, which is not a computer science hypothesis. Anyways, you have to be prepared for that. And I don't know how much of a focus it's going to be during a discussion, but it's a simple why question. Well, it's not a very simple why question. The question is simple, but the answer is not so simple. But you have to be prepared for that question. Okay, another why question. You have to be prepared for this one is, why did Tom choose visualization?
Yeah, well, as like translation, like digital humanities scholars, they are good at collecting data. They are good at creating data. They are good at such things. But when they collected this massive amount of data, they run into this problem with analyzing this and extracting knowledge from these data. So visualization is one of the best solutions to extract knowledge and study patterns and provide some new informations and insights from the data. So I think this is why he wants visualization. It's a quite common language to deliver and show knowledge and extract information, and also to share knowledge and new information.
Okay, not bad, not bad. Is there anything more specific? Are there any more specific reasons Tom wanted visualization? Can you say anything about like specific reasons? The answer you gave was very, very generic and applies to every project.
Very specific. I don't know how specific.
Like, do you know why Tom Cheeseman, Professor Tom Cheeseman, specifically chose visualization?
Is it because he knows you, maybe? I think this is a correct solution. It's a correct answer, but it can't be said.
It's actually not the correct answer. He didn't know me.
Okay.
He didn't know. He just Googled visualization Swansea University.
Okay.
That was the start.
So the question why he Googled visualization.
Yeah. Yep. That could be a good question. Yep. It's the same question basically.
Mm. No. Enlighten me.
You have to be prepared for this question or a variant of this question, right? These are very, very fundamental whys, right? So Tom there are two angles to the whys. The first angle you were starting to get to, which is the limitations of the existing tools, right? The existing tools have two fundamental limitations or three fundamental limitations. One is they're mostly manual work. The second is they generally only support close reading. And the third is they generally only support the comparison of two translations or one base and one translation at a time. So he was facing these three fundamental challenges: the manual work, only two at a time, and only close reading. So Tom had 50 translations that he wanted to study and compare, not just two. So he got the idea in his head that, okay, visualization, this is what visualization is meant for. I want to compare 50 translations. You can leave out the 50, you can just say 30. He had no way. He had too much manual labor. He wanted to see if there was something that could speed up the process to make it more automatic. He wanted distant reading techniques, right? He didn't really have any distant reading techniques. And thirdly, he wanted support for more than just 2 at a time. You know, these are some of the fundamental reasons why Tom chose visualization. And another very specific thing that this is not required knowledge, but it is part of the answer and it is correct, is Tom wanted a visual way to see how translations evolve over time with respect to stability. This was one of his first wishes. He said, I want to see which passages in the translations are stable. In other words, are translated consistently over time, and which ones are very unstable, with a special focus on the unstable passages, or those passages that are open to multiple interpretations. And those unstable passages are the ones that reflect the most historical value, because they're edited depending on the environment, the political environment and the cultural environment of the time. Yeah. So that was a very, very specific thing that Tom wanted to see.
Yeah, that's a good thing to be aware of.
Okay, I think I'm gonna ask that why TextVis question again. Why did you choose the TextVis project?
Yeah, well, it's you convinced me. Is that it's there was available projects. My interest was at the beginning. My proposal was to study high dimensional data, and text visualization includes high dimensionality challenge. So it was one of the available projects.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was one of the available projects. It's true, you're not lying. I think a better answer would be something like, this is a project nobody had ever worked on before. That would be a good answer. And this is clear. This is text visualization is a trendy topic. It's new. It's relatively young, new, and immature in visualization and visual analytics. So the possibilities to make contributions are very abundant. Something like those would be better answers, I think.
Yeah.
And another way of saying it was available is just characterizing its benefits. So it was a real project helping a real user with a real gnarly problem. And that adds a lot of value because you've got that interested second party. The fact that it's multidisciplinary is really interesting, brings an additional challenge, I think. And so that's one way of describing it's available, is describing the characteristics of it. So it had Tom, it had a real problem, it had a value to society beyond just, you know, the technical stuff we'll do. It had an interesting dynamic because of this culture difference between the multidisciplinary scholars. So all that adds richness to the opportunity, I think, and you may reflect on that. But I think
very good point. Very good. Yes.
Starting, Mohammed, that question with what you were interested in is critical. When you started, you know, that really highlights. I was first interested in multidimensional data. That's where my passion and interest was. And Bob had this opportunity where the project existed. It was new, it was on text-based data, and it offered a lot of opportunity, etc., etc. It was like this is the project, and therefore, you know, that met my initial interest, and it was an opportunity to take a project that was brewing and timely and had some nice, interesting characteristics about it.
Yes, very good. Very good. That's a very good point to mention, is like, this is an actual challenge that really exists. This is not just some made up academic exercise. Okay, I have some more why questions. These are, you just have to be prepared as much as possible to answer all the whys. Why did you do a survey of surveys?
Yeah, well, it's it reviews the state of the art in TextVis, what I'm planning to do. It has all the surveys themselves are quite valuable resource for my my challenges, my projects. So it's quite a valuable resource to review and study. Most of the surveys includes the state of the art in TextVis. They also report the current challenges, which is also valuable things to review and present to the community, and study and discuss and bring to the community. Yeah, that's why I did survey of surveys, TextVis. Also, there is a survey, the Yanaka survey, the close and distant reading, is the most close survey to my field, which has already been done. So I already benefited a lot. It's included in the survey of surveys. So surveying the both close and distant reading and its extension was quite valuable for my foundation phase project.
Why
didn't you just publish a TextVis survey, a normal one?
Well, there are really few TextVis surveys. There's the Cochan Can survey, the TextVis survey, which is quite current one, and also there's a multidisciplinary TextVis survey, which is the close and distant reading survey. So there's like two directions, and that I complemented in my survey, the close disciplinary surveys and the TextVis surveys.
Okay.
to extend that? What's the value of a survey of surveys beyond just reading the existing surveys that you said were quite recent and quite comprehensive?
Yeah, it's we have. I think the value is the meta data that we analyze and brought in the surveys themselves, in the survey of surveys. So also the bringing all of these challenges from all of these surveys and like in a comprehensive survey is quite a good thing for the community. Most of the surveys, each survey has its own set of challenges and trends and future work. So we combine them together and discuss them in our survey of surveys, which is quite, I think, valuable things to do for the community. We also studied the metadata for each survey, what they surveys, and the time span of these surveys to understand the trend of the TextVis approaches through all the time of the surface, which is also good to community to understand the landscape of the TextVis approaches.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I would just add to that, your survey of surveys adds the means by which to compare all the surveys to each other in a more general, like you said, landscape of TextVis. And it also provides a novel classification of text visualization surveys, which is related to the comparison part. So for the first time, you can now compare the surveys to each other.
Yeah, and also the recommendations, the survey recommendations.
Yeah. It could be also fun to just mention it's the very first survey of text surveys. So it's something new, which is nice. At least I think it's nice. Okay. Any other why questions before I ask my next one? So I noticed the order of your publications is in a certain way, but the order of the chapters doesn't automatically follow the order of the publications. Why is that?
Well, it's yeah, that's true, and the thesis is written in alignment with the translation studies workflow that we mentioned. So we worked with the same flow with what the user of the domain field they usually do. They usually do with the pre-processing, which align with the NLP phase, and then they look for the alignments help, and the alignments visual design align phase is there to fill this gap. And at the end, there is the analysis chapter, which is aligned with the analysis challenge, which is the last in the workflow. Yes, so it's to align with the typical workflow of the translation studies scholar.
Okay, what is the thesis? What is the title of your thesis?
Yeah, it's interactive visual analysis of translations.
Okay, very good. What is your thesis, does it fall into visual analytics or visualization?
Well, I see visual analytics and I see visual analytics as part of visualization myself, but there are some aspects of visual analytics in some chapters in my thesis. Visual analytics exploits visualizations and add on top of it the use of computational and power to undermine and understand and define the algorithms, which we include in many aspects of our chapters. So there is a visual analysis in most of the chapters that we have, in all of them, the three main contributions. But yeah, as I said, I see visual analytics as part of visualization, and it exploits visualization, and added on top of it is the user interference and use of computational power.
And why do you see visualization as part of visual? Wait, why do you see visual analytics as part of visualization and not the other way around? In other words, is visualization part of visual analytics, or is visual analytics part of visualization?
I would say myself, visualization is more general and include visual analytics. That's my. Am I wrong with this?
I personally see visual analytics as more general than
Okay.
visualization, and I see visualization as part of visual analytics. So I see visual analytics as combining visualization with something else, and that's typically like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and in your case, natural language processing, which makes it more general than just visualization. That's how I see it. So yeah, for this one, I don't know how much the examiners are going to focus on this. Probably they're not going to focus too much on this and try to like have this long debate about visualization versus visual analytics. Probably they're not, but some examiners I think would have this kind of debate that really is not very useful. But anyways, I just keep in mind that the way I see it is visual analytics is more general than visualization. It's the combination of visualization with another discipline, which is typically related to artificial intelligence. Yeah, and in your case, it's natural language processing.
Yeah.
Okay, some basic ones, and then I'm going to end. I have two more basic ones, but then I have one really difficult one for the last. But you still have it, like you have to be prepared for these. Well,
yeah, no, that's all right.
Why did you work on the VNLP?
Yeah, well, it's as the order of the thesis, PNLP was one of the first chapters, but in fact, it's one of the it was a result of our collaboration with the domain experts. So through our collaboration with Tom Cheeseman, it was a challenging always to for the domain experts to trust our functions and the algorithms. They were always, especially with the align phys, when we align visualizing, he always question the algorithm and the results of the algorithms, and so we decided to there was nothing done before in this area. There is no feasible NLP before. This concept is never been like published to do the NLP pipeline process and make it feasible and transparent and user modifiable, so the user can see and examine the parameters and intervene in the process itself and change and see the results, how they affect the end results with application, which we have now with the text similarities. So this is why we decided to do the VNLP project.
That seems like a very good answer to me. Why did you work on TransVis? What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, this is we already maybe answered this. This is one of the Tom Cheeseman, the collaborator, was one of his first wishes is to study the evolution of translations and to see how they are different from each others, and to provide and to see a distant reading along with the close reading view. And most of the current designs, they either do close readings or reading or distant reading. So providing them together was valuable things for the domain scholar to study the set of translations that we have.
Okay. So the difficult questions for the ends. What have you learned about the translations through your through your PhD?
I didn't get it. What do you mean?
What have you learned about the translations themselves? Have you learned anything about the translations now that you've studied them for your thesis?
Yes. Well, I would say it's more of something I noticed that translators don't usually translate in conceptual way or like conventional way. I also knew that there are some translators who could deviate into like in a strange way. They could deviate for some reasons from the original texts. What else? Yeah, there are a few actually in the TransVis. We already explored some like insights from the translations, but it's not in my head right now. I can.
Yes, it is. It's in the TransVis chapter. You're allowed to have the thesis sitting there in front of you, right, when you're answering these questions. So you're allowed to then go to the TransVis chapter and point out the section, whatever it is.
Yeah. Also, something else I noticed. It's already there with me, and one of the things that I learned that there is only one woman translators among the translations of the translators, and her translation were quite also different from others translator, and that was also observed through TransVis.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I think a really nice answer to this would also be that TransVis, it confirms Tom's or provides evidence that confirms Tom's original hypotheses, which is that the translations themselves do reflect political events throughout the 20th century. So you can see a noticeable gradient in the 1940s of the translations visually, in a very visual way, that reflects the political climate of that time. So you can see, for example, that there was censorship around the 1930s and 1940s. And then there was a new kind of divergence happening starting in the 1950s when World War II was finished, when World War II was history. So in fact, Tom's suspicions about the translations reflecting socio-political conditions is supported by this TransVis images, let's say, the TransVis work. That would be really nice if that question came up and then you explain that to them. I think that would be quite a nice thing. But it is in the chapter, But that doesn't mean that they won't ask the question. You know, they're going to ask you questions that are in your thesis, that are answered in your thesis, because they want to know, did you write this thesis or did somebody else write this thesis? Right. What did you learn about the alignment process when you were working on AlignVis?
Yeah, in terms of like from the translation scholar side, I learned something that they spend lots of time, for example, like doing manual alignments with they and I think they appreciate this as a and this is something we need to understand as a visualization community and to not avoid it. They see such a process, even though it's quite practical. I think this is something I learned. They want to see it as also a learning experience. While they align and do these kind of work, they read and learn something, and they want to avoid this. So this is something we did in, for example, in this is why in AlignVis we added some interaction techniques to not avoid the reading experience and how they read, even without the mouse, for example, using the arrows, for example, as a reading experience for them. This is something I thought they will see it as a practical thing, but they see it also as a learning experience. Yeah, this is the most actually like something I learned that struck me at the beginning, but they use for example, they don't use any, they use only sequential alignment. They don't use any like computational, what we do in AlignVis, where we use semi-automatic alignment. As also they want also the interveners. They don't trust always, they don't trust the user machine. They always question the machine resulted alignments. And this is why also in the workflow or the methodological workflow, we added some of the criteria to ensure the trustworthiness. Yeah.
Yes.
It's quite open answer, but
yeah, that's there's nothing wrong with that. I would also add, personally, I would emphasize the manual nature of the alignment process. And the more manual the process is, the more error prone it is. So it's quite a manual process. It's quite error prone. It's quite slow. And I think one of the biggest challenge, well, one of the biggest challenges, the two big challenges with the alignment are the speed. Like, it's a slow process, and the scalability. If you don't introduce any distant reading strategy at all, you end up with this extremely non-scalable process of a spreadsheet, you know, with all the text in the different cells. And yeah, I think that's like something, you know, that's a really interesting challenge. You know, that's by no means a solved problem, but you know, I think it would be interesting to mention those aspects.
yeah,
And those are two fundamental aspects that you're trying to address in alignments. Okay, and what have you learned about the NLP pipeline from working on VNLP?
Well, it's a I learned the even small, very clear function for the from the computer science side. It doesn't really mean that it's open and clear for the end user. So and this as from my point of view, I was skeptic about this, because for me, even like tokenization, for example, which is quite basic function, but when I view it and show it and see the results, there was lots also of implicit decisions that could confuse the end user. So showing the explicit results is for the I think it's a good thing to do, and trust to increase the trust of the system. So to not avoid any small thing, even though you think it's a quite trivial, sometimes it's not for the end user.
Yep, that's fine. I think some other good points to raise there are, there is no standard definition of the NLP pipeline. Like I would even say that that's one of the contributions, even though we didn't do it, is that we made the implicit NLP pipeline explicit. So there is an implicit NLP pipeline, but we've made it explicit by making it visible, and it wasn't standardized, or it's not standardized. Similar to the visualization pipeline, which is also not standardized. However, the visualization pipeline has been made explicit many, many times, whereas the NLP pipeline, I haven't seen that being made explicit like we have in the literature. And yeah, I think that's one of the interesting aspects of that. And that and like you said, that the smallest things that happen in the NLP pipeline are not standardized by any means. You know, tokenization is slightly different. A simple process like tokenization is going to be different for every single piece of software that performs that operation. So I think that's another interesting point to bring up. Even though it sounds very simple and conceptually it is very simple, in reality, every implementation produces different results, and there are lots of implied decisions being made, and that those implied decisions are what makes all of the implementations different. So people oversimplify the process in their heads, basically. They just think, oh, it's just tokenization, it's so simple. Yeah, conceptually it is simple, but guess what? Every time you run a program, every program produces different results. So there's a implicit complexity in there that people are not really appreciating and not really acknowledging. And this VNLP makes this very explicit and makes this very, you can no longer ignore it, so to speak. Yeah. Maybe I'm rambling a little bit. Okay, any other questions for, those were the tough ones.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
I'm very interested in the VNLP work, and who do you think will benefit from this work, and how will they benefit from this work?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. And yeah, that's one of the interesting thing about VNLP, that it's quite open. And by this, we mean the current status, we have one application, but it could be extend to any application. We can use, for example, any application, we can use any function with the same approach. So the current like status is for like anyone who wants to apply NLP to their design. But with, for example, if you apply a legal document application for it, it's a quite different user. If you apply other applications, it will change the end user. So it's quite endless applications with endless end users, and it's quite extendable to any applications or functions. And this is already mentioned in the future work sections that related to the VNLP.
How do they benefit? The second part of that question.
Yeah, they well, it's if they want to use NLP process, they want to understand it. They want to trust they got the results that they desire. So this is how they benefit from it, just to trust that they got the correct parameters and the results. And of course, the end user will now see if they choose some certain parameters with some certain settings, will get different results, and therefore they will adjust their NLP designs based on that.
Yeah. I would also mention that, you know, the beneficiaries are anybody that uses natural language processing as part of their work. And the most obvious beneficiary is the NLP community, right? You have a community of computational linguistics users, and that community would benefit from your work because they're all using NLP tools. And then you have another community of translators. So anybody doing translation and using that incorporates NLP into their work could benefit. And then of course the educational aspect. So teachers and students can benefit from VNLP by seeing how it works, seeing how the NLP pipeline actually works and what all those implicit decisions being made are and how they affect the results. So yeah, that was also something that would be worth mentioning. Okay, I think that's it for my questions. They're all why. They're basically all why questions, and that's where a lot of the questions are coming from, and from the examiners, like, why did you do this? Just a few comments on the slides.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think that slides 14, 15, 17 are not really necessary. Like you could, they're not strictly necessary in my opinion.
Okay, I see what you mentioned.
It's like, it's, you go into more detail about the chapters, but going into the detail about the chapters is not strictly necessary in my opinion for an overview. I would also modify some of those slides to include links to videos. Like wherever you have a publication, for example, on slide 16, you would also include a link to the video, even though you're not really going to necessarily play the video during the presentation, I would still include a link to it. And you have this slide 20 that talks about this evaluation. So yes, I would propose having one slide called evaluation, and it applies to your whole thesis. So the evaluation was done for this thesis was done through case studies, domain expert feedback, and other things. The what's that called? Agile development process. So you have one evaluation slide, and it covers the whole thesis, basically. Whereas here you're saying AlignVis was evaluated this way. Well, yeah, that's fine, but why not just have one evaluation slide that says all this thesis was evaluated through case studies, use case scenarios, domain expert feedback, the agile software development process, and so on. So it really just is one summary. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
You may want to include DOIs. That's a very small point. But you know what? Like, I think, if an examiner is sitting there watching your presentation, they might click on a DOI just to see it. Say like, oh, I want to see this paper. They might click on it. Or they might click on a video link. They might do it, I'm not sure. And say, oh, I'm going to add this to my watch later list. Just because I find it interesting and I want to watch it later. I think I would introduce another slide in the beginning, and it's like something like summary of contributions, and it has the full list of publications, including the ones under review. So like VNLP, I would say like submitted to the IV journal and we've got the reviews back, and now we're addressing the first set of reviews, like addressing first set of reviews, something like that. And I would also add the other evaluation chapter, the collaboration chapter, as like submitted to CDVE and is currently under review. I think the examiners are going to be interested in that information. They're gonna want to know like what's going on with these two chapters. They're definitely going to want to know about that. At least when I'm an examiner and I see an unpublished chapter, I'm automatically thinking in my mind, what's going on with this chapter? Are you trying to publish it, or are you just like trying to
Gave
ignore-
up.
Yeah, did you give like, is there any hope for this chapter? But I just want to know what's going on with those chapters, basically. Yeah. And then, you know,
They will see, they will read the story of TransVis, and they will see that we are not a give uppers. We don't give up. This guy will resist.
Yeah, you have to tell me what the examiners tell you about that chapter, if they find that history part interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
By the way, Wong asked a question about like what was the biggest challenge or the most difficult problem.
Yes.
Was that a technical question, Wong?
Both, I guess. It can be technical.
Because I think one of your challenges, Mohammed, was the review process for TransVis, right? That was one of the big challenges. Like that's not really necessarily a technical challenge. It's more like it's a perseverance and personality. It's a personality challenge, really. So you could mention that, you know, but it's in your thesis, so yeah. But it would be a valid answer. Like this crazy long review process for the TransVis paper was very challenging, right? Because it was excessively long. And I don't think that was really our fault. I think that was just an artifact of this review cycle business, and sometimes it's not perfect, basically. I don't think there was a scientific problem. Yeah. Okay. I think that's enough from me. Anybody else?
I just, I will say, Mohammed, that I'm very impressed with both the presentation and the thesis, the way you presented it and written it and assembled it. And you should take great pride and confidence in producing such quality work going into the Viva. It's very, very clear that you've done a significant piece of work and made some contributions from just the materials you present. And I think we've chatted today about, I think if you're reflecting on what you can improve going into the Viva, we've covered it today. It's the questions outside of the work a little bit. Bob pushed you outside the why ahead of the work, if you like, if you think about it in that way, what motivated the work. But also I think there are a few questions that asked you about impact, kind of what happens beyond the work as well. And I think those are the areas you can, you know, done some of that, a lot of that today, that you can reflect on those areas, because I think the work you present is really, really solid. And you will get questions about the work you present, obviously. But I have every confidence that you're able to describe that well, as you have done in the document you produced.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, I agree with Matt. You're going into this Viva with a very strong position.
Thank
And
you, Bob.
it is a good, very, very good thesis. And that very last comment I made about the summary of contributions pushes it even further. Because when you add the information about the VNLP already having gone through a review cycle, the examiners are that's gonna make a positive impact on the examiners. They're gonna say, oh, this thing has already been reviewed actually. And then they're going to be thinking, I wonder what the reviewers said. And you can tell them, oh, this is what the reviewers said, and here's what we're doing to improve that chapter. It's fine. But it adds even more strength to the strength that you already have. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned that. And if you have it all on one slide, it looks very impressive. And I would add on that slide the CGVC paper, and it looks even more impressive. Like if that one slide will just like, boom, really impress everybody. You have the chance to really knock out the examiners with this one slide. Yeah, and just wave bye. You undersold yourself a little bit. I think that's the short answer. You undersold a little bit. You could even raise the bar higher. But yeah, it's a great thesis. So you're in good shape.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Bob.
You even have hero status. I forgot about that. You achieved hero status. Yes.
We achieved.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Just an observation. The date for your, I've got penciled in this coming Friday, right?
Yes, it's the coming Friday. Yes.
Coming Friday. Okay. Yeah. Friday morning.
Yes.
Be on. Yeah. So obviously, good luck for that, and
Thank you.
I'll be looking out for the emails. I don't know, Bob. Maybe you know. Do I get informed as a matter of course as the sort of in technical terms only? I'm the sort of supervisor. I mean, do the chair let us know or something like that by a matter of course?